I'm kind of known here as the crowd control pastor, crowd control preacher. When our numbers start to get up a little bit, Dave brings me in, I preach, I offend a bunch of people, they leave, the crowd becomes a little bit more manageable. So the increased numbers and church attendance and the offering have gone up. We've been able to do so many great things. Dave doesn't want us to get spoiled, so he has to come back and preach this week. I'm kidding. I'm hoping that nobody leaves today. Not like last time. I'm just kidding. It's fine. I appreciate you guys coming so much, coming today. The message today is entitled Man Up. And as Dave said earlier, some of you guys might be thinking, oh, well, I'm not a man. And if you're not sure, talk to, we have medical trained staff here. They can help figure that out after the service. We might be able to help you figure out that even though you're not a man, okay, you probably know a man, you might be married to a man, you might have hopefully you have a father who was a man, and or maybe you're raising a man, okay, or you're trying to raise a man. This is important stuff. Or maybe you're one day hoping to marry a man, or like some of us, you're hoping one day to be able to become a man. This will be stuff that's going to be important to know, important to pay attention to. You might be able to, if you like, say, if you're dating somebody, these are good qualities, good traits to look for. Whenever I preach a message, whenever I teach, I always try to make sure I'm applying things to myself. And this actually was kind of a hard week, because there were several times when some of these traits that we're going to look at, I had to remind myself, I don't know if I'm really exhibiting this the best way that I can right now, specifically with like not being prone to anger outbursts. It was a rough week at work. I have a low tolerance for foolishness. I'm, you know how people are like lactose intolerant? I'm idiot intolerant. So unfortunately this week I had to cross a lot of paths with certain special people, and it really tested me. And but hey, I made it. The police were not called to work, so anytime I can go in and no police get called in, that's fantastic. So we think about manning up, what that phrase means. Okay, I don't know if you get this picture in your head. I oftentimes think of a lot of, maybe black and white cowboy movies I used to watch with my grandpa when I was a kid. And a lot of those had characters like John Wayne and William Holden, other actors, and maybe later on farther in life you'd get Clint Eastwood and Gary Coleman. Wait, I'm sorry, Gary Coleman doesn't really fit in there. But you get these ideas of like what a real man should be like. So I thought, well, let's get some quotes or look at some pictures of men throughout history. And the first one that you'll see here is should be John Wayne. And he says, this is a quote, someone asked him about when he tries to play a man, his roles, what are they? He says, I want to play a real man in all of my films. And I define manhood simply. Men should be tough. Men should be fair. They should be courageous, never petty, never looking for a fight, but never backing down from one either. So that comes from John Wayne. That's some pretty good advice there. Look at this next picture. Here's a guy, I don't know if you've probably seen him. He's a little before John Wayne. Winston Churchill, okay? And one of the reasons I like Winston Churchill is he gives me one of my favorite quotes. He was not a perfect man. He had a lot of character flaws. And one of his character flaws is that he liked to drink a lot. And he was at a party once, and you guys may have heard this before, and there was a official British lady, and she was actually referred to, her title was Lady Astor, A-S-T-O-R. And she came up to him and she just said, you sir, you are a drunkard. You are a scoundrel. She just talked about, you have horrible behavior, your manners are horrible, and it's just, you should be ashamed of yourself. And Winston Churchill said, yes, my dear, he said, you may be right. And he said, I may drink a little bit too much, but he said, in the morning, trust me, I will be sober, but unfortunately, ma'am, in the morning, you will still be ugly. So that's what he said. That's one of my greatest, I love that quote. But he said, a man does what he must, in spite of personal consequences. in spite of obstacles and dangers and pressures, and that is the basis of all human morality. Hey, that's some pretty good stuff. Do what you do regardless of the consequences. I try to tell my kids, do the right thing because it's the right thing, and that's why you're going to do the right thing. Don't worry about the consequence of people laughing at you. If it's the right thing, that's what you need. That's what you need to do. Next slide. Maybe you've seen this guy before. And interestingly, does anyone know what this guy's name is? His name is Mike Conley. He's obviously a real person. And guess what state he was born in? Pennsylvania. Do you know what town? For 1,000 bonus points. What's that? Towanda, Pennsylvania. Anyone know where's Towanda is? Wasn't Towanda, wasn't that also like Napoleon Dynamite's girlfriend? Or his cousin, his brother's Kip's?
I think that was Lawanda.
That was Fawanda, or something like that? Okay. But no, he was a real guy. He was born in Towanda, Pennsylvania, born in 1860. Now, obviously, I can't confirm that these are his words, and I can almost confirm they are not his words, but he has a mindset of outnumbered. Are you outnumbered? No, don't look at yourself as ever being outnumbered. Always think of yourself as being in a target-rich environment. The same guy you might ask, someone ever asked you, how many push-ups can I do? The correct response should be all of them, okay? You ever have an open wound? Does that ever happen to you, Will? You ever have an open wound, gaping wound on your side? Okay, is it really an open wound? No. You respond, oh, what do you mean, an extra pocket? Okay, yes, these are examples of manhood. Now, this next guy, you've probably seen him before, Teddy Roosevelt, and this is a true story. He was giving a speech, and during his speech he said, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know whether you fully understand that I have just been shot, but it takes more than that to kill a bull moose. Okay? Now this is a true story. I don't know if you probably can't, I don't know if you can read the words or not up there, but this is an excerpt from a 1912 campaign speech, where Theodore Roosevelt gave a speech in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The speech occurred immediately after a failed assassination attempt by John Fleming Schrank, who shot the former president point blank with a .32 caliber weapon. The speech that he gave, they wanted to take him to the hospital, but he refused to go to the hospital. He said, no, I have a speech to give. I'm going to give the speech. The bullet was in him. The speech was over 90 minutes. Hey, you guys think I talk long or Pastor Dave talks long? Looking at 90 minutes, come on. And I don't know, Dave, have you ever given a sermon with a bullet stuck in your side?
I never have.
Okay, next week, bullet in the side challenge, okay? If you can do it, I'll donate the bullet and we'll donate $1,000 to charity.
Can I go 90 minutes?
90 minutes, if you can go 90 minutes, that'll be the exchange.
Awesome.
The bullet was still in him the whole time that he gave the speech. Now, man, if that's not a man's man, I don't know what is. Now, I don't know who this guy is, this next guy. He might be pretty famous. Maybe you've seen him before. But this is an actual phrase that I've given. I was talking to somebody, and after I said, I was like, well, I got to write this down. This could be a good quote. Some men only understand the language of violence. Should we cross paths, I intend to be fluent. Wow, that's pretty impressive, isn't it? I think it's pretty cool. Watch out for him. Now, if you look at his next example, I don't know if you've ever heard of this guy. His name is Mitchell Page. And he was so manly that the company that made G.I. Joe dolls came and they made a G.I. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. Forgive me, Mr. Page. It is not a doll. It is a action figure. Okay? Never, if you're a boy, play with dolls. Tell me that right now. It's always an action figure. Okay? That's a flashback. My mom, when I was a little kid, she gave me like a baby to sit in a chair. And I was holding the baby doll in a rocking chair and it was brushing his hair. And I remember my dad coming in and saying, what are you trying to do to that boy? Turn him into some kind of fairy? And I really didn't know what he was talking about. I thought, what, am I going to sprout up with wings and get a magic wand? Is that what's going to happen? And but no, I played with the doll and I think I turned out okay. Mitchell Page was a man who was born in 1918. He became a Eagle Scout, which I don't know if you know what Eagle Scouts are. They are able to untie any kind of knot you have in your shoelaces instantly, and they can create a fire by rubbing a bunch of sticks together real fast, among a whole bunch of other things. It's a pretty big deal to be an Eagle Scout. But after he attained the rank of Eagle Scout, he didn't even wait to go pick up the award. He went to the Marine recruiter office and enlisted with the United States Marines. He ended up, I think before the war even started, he got into a altercation in a bar with a Japanese officer. This was before we were actually at war. We were in Shanghai. He was in Shanghai, and there was the Japanese officer for some reason tried to take a samurai sword and decapitate him in the bar. He didn't really think he liked that very much, and ended up knocking the guy out. So yeah, he's pretty tough. He ended up actually spending some time on a battleship, working on a ship as a gunner on the side. Yes, Marines were sometimes on Navy ships. And he ended up going to the Battle of Guadalcanal, which happened on October 26th, 1942, if I remember correctly. And it was a real bad situation. It was, like, remember your, like, the Roseanne show, when you had Dan and Roseanne and their daughter Becky, and they tried to take Becky off and replace her with somebody else, and the show really went downhill. That was like really bad. That's kind of like what Guadalcanal was like. Just multiply that by 50, 100 times. The United States Marines were on the island, and his unit had in front of them, if I remember correctly, about 2,500 Japanese soldiers. He had a group of 33 Marines. He operated a heavy machine gun squadron that was there, heavy machine gun crew. And there was a series of attacks. Basically, as these attacks are going on, he's realizing that he's finding less and less and less of the soldiers around him, to the point that he realizes that he's the only one. And one of the things that he does, he's set up here along the top of a hill. The Japanese soldiers come and they attack and attack again. And at one point during the attack, he makes sure that he's waiting until they can hear their canteens banging up against the side of their legs of their belt before they get that close. And when he realizes that there's no one else for him to work with, he still doesn't give up his position. He keeps fighting. As a matter of fact, he runs from along the hill from one machine gun to the next, to the next, to the next, and fires a few bursts of shells, so that the Japanese who are advancing in the dark will think there's multiple positions that are manned. In all reality, it's only him. Once there's approximately a dump truck load of ammunition that's expelled, he does the only thing he can do and pick up some grenades. And he just goes and gets hand-to-hand combat with grenades. And eventually he finds some more ammunition, but he realizes this running back and forth is going to put him in a very vulnerable position. So he takes one of these machine guns that's intended to be set on a tripod and used in a tripod and used in a fixed position. He picks it up and carries it and slings it over his arm. And if you know anything about a gun, a barrel, if you've ever shot it more than once or twice, what happens to that barrel?
Hot.
It gets really, really, really hot, okay? So this guy is basically picking up a heavy gun that's intended to be used on a metal mount and carrying it, pretty much like you might imagine Rambo, or what the picture is there. It gets to the point to where when daytime comes, he's one of the few guys that's left, and he ends up capturing a bunch of Japanese people. And they were so astounded when they found out that advance after advance after advance, that the hill was defended by basically, for the most part, one Marine. Later on, he gathered a handful of others and told them to follow him. So this dude is pretty darn tough. Now, he won a Medal of Honor for this. Now, the next guy in the picture here, his name is last name is Custer. Now, maybe you've heard of him. You might have heard of his older brother, George Armstrong Custer. Well, George did a lot of amazing things, had a lot of amazing feats during the war, during the Civil War. But this is his younger brother, who actually was one of the few people in the United States ever to get 2 Medal of Honors. Okay, not 1, but not 2, and he also did it within the same calendar week. Okay, you guys might have pretty rough weeks at work, but I don't think any of you have ever gone through anything that would qualify you within the span of 7 days to get awarded 2 medals of honor. He was born, I think it was in Ohio, and one of the things that he did is he found out his older brother George was when he was in the Army. He decided he wanted to go ahead and enlist too, and when he was 15, he decided, I'm going to go ahead to the recruiter's office and enlist. He went to the recruiter's office to go enlist, and his dad found out what he was doing and said, no way are you going to do this, you're not old enough. So he had to wait a whole another year till he was 16. On his 16th birthday, as soon as he could, he was right back to the recruiter's office to go ahead and enlist. He fought in several battles of the Western Theater and the American Civil War, and eventually ended up in the 6th Michigan Cavalry with his older brother. They had a battle where he was, it was called Namazine Church. It was in Virginia. And he ended up taking his horse, jumping up over a fence, running right into a line of Confederate soldiers. And the way they fought back then, you would have a guy standing right beside another guy, beside another guy, beside another guy, basically a wall of soldiers with rifles and oftentimes bayonets fixed on the end. He jumped right up over the horse, or took with his horse, jumped over a fence, and basically ran right into the line of soldiers. For his actions there, I can't even discuss everything that he did because we don't have the time this morning. But he was awarded the Medal of Honor. Within a week later, he was at another battle in Virginia called Sailor's Creek. And one of the things that happened there is that the fight was going on, and you kind of have to understand the way people fought back then. What was really, really, real important was your flag, okay, or your unit's flag, okay. We've got all this stuff going on in politics and in the news about flags, disrespecting the flags, not want to stand for the national anthem. But from the very least, from a military tradition, there was nothing that you would ever do to let someone disrespect your flag, or not only disrespect it, let it be taken from you. Because remember, when you're on a battlefield, you don't have access to GPS, heads-up displays, shortwave radio, anything like that. And oftentimes when you fight, there'd be screaming, loud explosions. Oftentimes your hearing could be lost. You couldn't even hear someone beside you if they were yelling your name. But one thing you could always count on is being able to look around and find your flag, your unit's flag, or at the very least another American flag. That you know if you lost contact with the guy beside you, you could always look back at the flag and rally around the flag and go back. Well, during this battle in Sailor's Creek, Thomas Custer sees a Confederate flag, and sees a Confederate soldier trying to rally his soldiers around him, try to get him formed back up. He decides he's going to run over there and take that soldier's flag. Well, the Confederate soldier wasn't going to very readily give up his flag, so when he pulls out his pistol and shoots Thomas Custer in the jaw. All that does is make Tom a little bit mad, a little bit angry. He pulls out his gun, shoots that man, takes his flag, gallops back, returns to headquarters, and hands it to his older brother and says, "Here's the flag I took." And he starts to run back, and George Custer says, "Whoa, hold on, what are you doing? You've been shot in the face, you need to stay here." He's like, "I don't got time to bleed, dude, okay? I'm running back, I'm going back to the fight." And his older brother actually has to take 3 people to place him under arrest and force him to go back to the medic station. Now, you've heard about the Battle of Little Bighorn. This is where George Armstrong Custer did die. What they found out is that Tom Custer didn't end up dying by his command. They found him later on in the battlefield, right side by side his brother. They figured he was most likely the last person in his command to survive, would have crawled, if he possibly could, through the smoke and the chaos to fight back to back with his brother. They found the 2 of them with their dead horses around them being used for cover, with 163 Indian bodies around them in a circle. So that's where he met his death, fighting side by side his brother. And you're probably trying to say, "Jody, what does this have to do with the Bible and about being a man?" What we're going to look at in just a second here is Titus. And I want this passage, okay? This passage is our flag as men, or it can be one of the passages. It provides us with ideals for men that we can use as our flag to rally around. Sometimes life gets crazy. Sometimes life gets stupid. Sometimes life gets to me last week at work, you're just thinking, this is ridiculous. I can hardly stand this. And you always need something to rally around. Now here's a standard that we can rally around. Now one thing I will tell you, this is not a standard that, should you do it, should you fail to meet it, you're disqualified, you're a loser, you're a bum. It's kind of like a Proverbs 31 woman. It's a standard for us to attain. And I don't want you guys to feel down if you're like, whoops, you read the first thing, I can't do that. No, I'm a bum. Whenever you fall, get back up off your feet and try at it and get at it again. Let's take a look real quick. Turn with me in your Bibles, if you will, to Titus chapter 1, verses 6 through 9. Now what's going on here is Paul had left a man behind at a church named Titus, and he's supposed to finish the work of getting this church up and going. And one of the things that he does is he says, hey, these are the type of people that I want you to surround yourself with. Okay? So when we think of people like Tom Custer, Mitchell Page, Mike Conley, Jody Sarno, John Wayne, we think of people like that. They should have qualities like this here in Titus. I'm going to read verses 6 through 9, and I'm reading from the New Living Translation. Paul tells Titus, he says, an elder must live a blameless life. He must be faithful to his wife. And his children must be believers who don't have a reputation for being wild or rebellious. An elder is a manager of God's household, so he must live a blameless life. He must not be arrogant or quick-tempered. He must not be a heavy drinker, violent, or dishonest with money. Rather, he must enjoy having guests in his home, and he must love what is good. He must live wisely and be just. He must live a devout and disciplined life. He must have a strong belief in the trustworthy message he was taught. Then he will be able to encourage others with wholesome teaching and show those who oppose it where they are wrong. Join me in prayer real quick, if you will. God, thank you so much for this opportunity to take your word, your message, and give it and share it with fellow believers. Ask that you bless our hearts, open our mind, open our ears, allow truth to come out of my mouth accurately in a way that would bring honor and glory to you. Help us to be men that you would want us to be, the men that we can be, and the men that I believe that we need to be for our families, for our communities, for our church, for our country. Amen. When we look at this passage, the first thing that we realize is there's certain things that men are, and there's certain things that men are not to be. Okay? The first thing that jumps out in the passage, Paul tells Titus that you need to have men who are blameless. Okay? Now, what I believe this means is not someone who has never messed up. Not someone who has never made a mistake. Not someone who has never done anything wrong. But it refers more to the person's reputation or their character. And you can imagine, if you will, that you're in a conversation with somebody. Like, hey, do you know this guy, Steve, that lives down the street from me? Oh, and as someone who maybe met him, would know Steve, what is their first inclination? What is the first thing that comes to their mind? Oh yeah, Steve, he's a real lying crook. Stay away from that guy. Or, you know what, hey, Steve's a real nice, honest guy. He worked on my car the other week. Yeah, I take my cars to him all the time, and he works on them. One of the nice things about Steve is that when I take my car in, I thought I was going to need $800 worth of work, and he told me, listen, you just need a couple of like $20 parts. I'll put them on. Everything's fine for you. You're good to go. I hate it when I take my car someplace, and I wonder, is someone going to like rip me off? I can do a lot of the repairs myself, but I don't have the time to do it. But sometimes nowadays on these cars, they hook something up, and a computer tells them, oh yeah, this is bad, and sometimes you just kind of have to take the word for it. And what blameless means is if this person has messed up and has made mistakes, that they've made it right with the people who they may have offended. Basically, it's kind of like all your account balances are paid in full as far as offending people goes. That doesn't mean you have a reputation of constantly doing stupid stuff and then immediately saying, hey, I'm sorry, okay? But you got to have a good reputation. When the person's name is mentioned, you got to think of what the first thing that comes to mind. Dave mentioned something the other day. Hey, if someone tried to arrest you for being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to commit you? I'm telling you what we're talking about is, as a Christian or being a man of good character, if you are charged, you shouldn't have to worry about getting into a hung jury and having a trial that's going to last for 6 months. Okay? It should be pretty easy to be like, hey man, this guy's a pretty good guy. He treats everybody square that he deals with. Next thing that you see is that a real man, is someone who is faithful to his wife. Now remember these movies that I was telling you sometimes I'd watch with my grandpa, and we'd see the man. Sometimes the men were running around. Sometimes it was grabbing women in the saloon, throwing them up, giving them kisses. One night they're with this woman, one night they're with that woman. But with this woman, do you ever go and you sometimes you maybe work at different places than I do, but you hear people talk about, oh yeah, man, I've been with so many women, and the women love me. They can't stand to be away from me. I'm Mr. Irresistible. Remember Wilt Chamberlain? Wilt Chamberlain scored an NBA record 100 points in a single basketball game. But one of the things that he had talked about was how many women over the course of his career that he had been with. That's not the kind of man that we're looking for. As a matter of fact, I think as men, real men, godly men, instead of bragging about how many women that we've been with, we should be able to brag about how long we've been with the one woman that we've been with. Amen? All right? Come on. Sometimes I hear people that talking and it's like, well, if I saw this woman, I would do this, and I saw this woman, I would do that. And I think, hey, no, you wouldn't. But can't we brag about, man, how long have I been with this miserable old lady that always is putting me down? No, please, don't do that, okay? But are you faithful to your wife? Do you have a reputation for being faithful? Okay? When people talk about you at work, oh yeah, hey, that's the guy. And also some of the stuff you're doing, even if you're thinking, hey, it looks all right, or I think I'm not really doing anything wrong, but what does it look like? You be careful about that, okay? So be blameless, be faithful to your wife, okay? And here's the next thing. A real man, now remember some of these things, don't get mad at me if you're like, this doesn't make any sense. I'm pulling this right out of God's word. This is his standard for leaders in the church, okay? A man who raises godly children, okay? I'm going to be the first one to tell you that you can spend years working with your children, taking them to school, taking them to Sunday school, taking them to church, and at some point when they get older, they're going to do what they want to do, okay, on their own. But still, they're going to find times when they remember. My son will tell me, hey, Dad, I remembered when you told me this. I remember when you told me this. And I tell you what, nothing warms my heart more than when my son can tell me something that he remembers me telling him that maybe I even forgot myself. I pass it on, but he remembers it. What I'm getting is that these kids, you'd be surprised, they remember the little things. They remember the things that and sometimes it's not even the time that you sit down and you give your kids these lectures. It's what happens when they remember you doing something, or they remember you coming home from work early and taking them out for ice cream because you promised you would, even though you feel like your back's hurting, but you just want to go home and you want to be left alone. But you still keep your word with your kids. You tell them you're going to go out and throw the ball with them, you throw the ball with them. You can tell a lot about a man, about how his children act. It can bring great shame. It can also bring great pride. So be careful, men, what you're passing on to your children. One thing that I told my boys, and especially David's in the Army, I said, hey, take a look at that tag that's on your chest. And it has his name. I said, your name is something that's given to you and it means something. I said, I gave it to you. I tried to give it to you as clean as I could. and without tarnish. Take it, if you can, polish it up a little bit better, but make sure when you're handing it off to your children that you're giving them something proud that they can go ahead and hand off to their children as they get older. So a real man's blameless. He's faithful to his wife. He raises godly children. Here's another thing. Real men are not arrogant. Anybody say, what's arrogant mean? Arrogant it reflects on how you view yourself in comparison to other people. And I'm going to give you an example of an arrogant person. A person who's arrogant is the kind of person that when you're at a party and you've got a pizza there and everyone's in line, does anyone ever do what I call pizza math? Okay? Pizza math is when you're sitting at the party and you know I got how many pieces, how many people I got there, you know, where do I need to get in line, how many pieces of pizza can I eat? Can I eat 2? And that's enough to make sure everyone gets some. An arrogant person is the kind of guy that goes up in line and he picks 4 pieces of pizza and puts them on his plate without counting. And you know, man, if everyone's going to get a piece of pizza, we just got to take 2 pieces. That guy, that kind of guy, he doesn't care about whether everybody else gets a slice of pizza or not. He just wants to make sure that he can get enough pizza to put in his belly. Okay? So, that's why when I go to parties, I always pack an extra lunch, small pizza, put it in the car. I can go out and take a couple bites of pizza if the pizza count ever runs low. No, I'm kidding. But someone who's arrogant is always going to think about himself before everybody else. Okay? Here's the next thing. A real man's blameless. He's faithful to his wife. He raises godly children. He's not arrogant. And he's not a heavy drinker. I tell you what, that's one of these things that in these movies, how many times do you see cowboys, westerns, in the movie sitting there at the bar? What are they having? Give me a shot of whiskey. Give me another this. Give me another that. Give me another this. I've seen so many people get tripped up on drinking and have it ruin lives, ruin families. And it would be really easy, I've said this before, it would be really easy if there was a verse in the Bible that said you should just never, ever drink, period. Okay? But as a matter of fact, there are verses in the Bible where people are told to drink. Okay? But one of the things that we are warned about is getting drunk and actually having our mind and our body influenced by alcohol. Matter of fact, the Bible says to be not drunk with wine, wherein there is excess, but to be filled with the Holy Spirit. You should be able to have your mind being influenced by God rather than alcohol. And if you're getting to the point where you're having trouble with that and it's affecting your decisions, I'm going to tell you what, any bad decisions that I've ever made have oftentimes been when I've not been thinking clearly. And sometimes it's not necessarily talking about alcohol, but it's not stopping and thinking before I do something about how this is going to affect me long term. And that's what happens when you are drunk or you're doing drugs or anything. Oftentimes you just don't stop and reason and think things through. A real man is also not violent. Okay? Now you might have said, Jody, you just went and you talked about all these people that were soldiers that were shooting people and doing this and doing that. Hey, there's a quote, Robert E. Lee, I think it's fantastic, that he said that it is well that war is terrible, lest that we grow fond of it. And there are a lot of horrible things in war, and I'm not glorifying taking another man's life. But what I do think that we can look at is see when someone is willing to put their own life at great risk to defend and protect the safety of others around them. What this means is it's talking about someone who is, something happens at work, I don't know, we're talking about pizzas, maybe the pizza guy comes, and the pizza guy's 5 minutes late, so you open the door, and the first thing you do, boom, punch him in the jaw, pick up the pizza and say, next time you're going to be on time, and you close the door. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. They're going to call the police on you, okay? You've just stolen a pizza, okay? Are you someone that is instantly, when anything doesn't go right, you're busting up stuff in the house, punching the dog, kicking your wife, or vice versa? If that's where you're going, yeah, you've got a problem with violence. Jesus, when I had my wife read this passage to me, I think, Jesus, remember when we went into the temple and you find, I think in John chapter 2, He went into the temple and he found the temple, which was supposed to be a house of prayer, was turned into a marketplace where people were selling doves. They were taking God's house and making it into something he wasn't supposed to be. Jesus got a little upset. As a matter of fact, the scriptures say he took tables and chairs and flipped them over and overturned them. And actually, I had this picture in my mind that Jesus used a whip to drive people out. And I had to ask my wife, I was like, am I just having that idea in my head? Did that really happen? We looked at John chapter 2. And what it says is that Jesus did use a whip. And it said that when he went there, it said he fashioned it out of a cord. Okay? Now what that tells me is he didn't come with a whip in his hand. He didn't have one in his pocket. He wasn't going there thinking, as soon as I see someone, I'm going to bust them over the head. I do believe he got a little bit upset. He got anger. I don't believe he sinned. But he took some time, and he was probably thinking through how he's going to do this. I mean, ultimately, he basically went into a store, flipped tables over, and kicked people out because they were desecrating God's house. I don't want people, if a real man shouldn't be someone who loses his temper and automatically runs around and starts punching people and busting people up. But I will tell you, should anyone ever come inside my house, and I've said this before, try to hurt me or my family, it will not end well for them. And that's just, I think that's my role as a husband and a father, protect the people around me. So you see, a man is not going to be prone to violence. He's not going to have that as a reputation. Man is also going to be not dishonest with money. Okay? Basically, you know what I'm talking about? You're going to have someone, he's not going to be someone who's always cheating somebody. Okay? The kind of guy that if you ask him to go to the store and pick something up for you, you give him $20, he's going to come back with $20 worth of stuff. Okay? I used to be able to, when my mom was a kid, used to be able to give me $10 bill. I could go to the store, go get milk, bread, steak, hamburgers, some juice, and bring a couple bags loads of stuff. And I'm telling you what, you can't do that today. You just can't. You know why? There's too many security cameras in the grocery store. But you should be able to be someone who is honest with money. Someone that if you could actually give them your bank card if they needed to use it, and it's going to come back and they're going to use exactly what they told you they were going to use it for. My sister had a friend that said, hey, I need to go to a store, I need to get some, I don't know if it was Halloween clothes or something for my kids. I just don't have any money right now. Can I borrow any money? My sister didn't even have any money on her. She said, here, what I do is I have a credit card. You can use this. Keep it under, I don't know if she told her $100 or $60 or whatever it was. She gave it to the friend. The friend did go to the store. The friend went back, gave her her card, and said, I did get a little bit over. I did go a little bit more than what you told me I should, but I promise I'm going to pay it back. I think she spent over $300 worth of stuff on my sister's credit card, and this is years ago, and to this day, still hasn't got it back. Okay? So, Lisa, Franklin, my sister would appreciate it if you paid her back. Okay? All right? But that is a true story. It was not Lisa. That part is not true. But if you're going to be a godly man, you need to be somebody that, man, you're not ripping people off and you can be trusted with money. You also need to be someone who is hospitable. Okay? Someone who loves what is good, someone who is self-disciplined, and someone who is devout. Now this hospitable thing, I don't think it means that we all need to be Martha Stewarts. Okay? Because I don't usually get too fancy with like, oh, here, we'll make sure we put out the fall silverware, you know, that kind of stuff. But this is something that is actually hard for me. And I read that. You ever read something in the Bible, and you're like, whoa, that must have been a stigmatism eye. That is really not there. I have a hard time imagining a manly man, John Wayne, hey partner, come over, I've got some chicken and biscuits for you. That's a horrible impersonation, but you can imagine it. But yeah, but what I think, what we're trying to get across is you should be someone who is concerned and worried about the affairs of others, and is also willing, if you see someone in need, willing to bring them in, to take your house not only as a sanctuary for your family, which it is, but not be afraid to open it up and help somebody out. Not be able to have people over, because that time, back in the time when this was written, people who were traveling and who would go, if you didn't have a place to stay at night, you're probably going to get robbed, or killed, or beat up. If you're lucky, maybe you'll just get beat up. You need to be a lover of what is good. You need to have someone who's concerned about doing the right thing. Someone who wants to make sure, hey, this is done right. And I tell you what, one of the neatest things was with my dad, and we were working on something, a project, and it was something I was having to grind and sand, and I worked on it, and I figured, it makes my dad's kind of a hard guy to please, and I thought, man, this has got to be good for him. And I said, I showed it to him, I said, hey Dad, do you think this is good enough? And his response, I was like hoping it would be, yes it is, or no it isn't. And his response was, can you do better? And I just remember him looking at it real quick. And then he didn't even pick it up and examine it. He's like, can you do better? I was like, well, maybe. He said, well, then I think you know the answer, then you should. Anything that you do, make sure you're doing your best. And also be concerned about doing the right thing. Someone who's self-disciplined. Basically, this means someone who's able to control themselves, who's not given to, doesn't let their body and their desires be able to control their thought process and what they're doing. Be able, even though you want something, to be able to say no. Not someone who is like, every time they mess up, dude, I was famished. I'm looking for something to blame, or weak. And you know how you become self-disciplined? You practice. It isn't something that happens overnight. The last thing that I want us to look at is someone who is the idea of being devout or being godly. Some translations, I think, say to be holy. Once again, this doesn't mean that you're perfect, you never mess up, that you never skip any of the standards. But if you fall down, you get back up, you go back at it. But you should have a reputation as a man. Our passage said that you're able to understand the truths that you've been taught. You should know the Bible well enough that you can teach truth to people. And that also when there's untruth, that person can be corrected. And you can say, if you have to tell someone, hey, I don't think that's really what God's talking about. And they say, well, why? What? You should be able to know your scripture and know what God says well enough to be able to say, this is why I believe what I believe. Praise band, if you want to come up, you guys can, please. These are all characteristics that we should strive after. Whether you're a man, whether you're a woman, whether one day you hope to grow up and be a man. If you're dating somebody, don't settle for something. Don't settle for second best, third best. Look for someone who exhibits these qualities. And wives, women, if you have a man that you're married to, and you see him exhibiting some of these qualities, from a man's perspective, I don't know, maybe some people don't need to be told what they're doing is right, but I appreciate it. I really like it when sometimes my wife comes and says, hey, I really saw what you were to do today. I appreciate that. Let someone know that you noticed what they're doing is really godly. If there's a picture I want to show you guys real fast. And there's a picture, that's me. I don't know if you guys can see it. That's me on the right, the guy with the blonde hair. Yeah, I used to have blonde hair. And the guy on the left is my cousin. That's my dad right there. I'm 42 years old. And I remember this moment like it was yesterday. I remember my mom grabbing a picture. And my dad, actually, honestly, in this picture here, my dad is probably 3 sheets to the wind. And he would when he would start drinking, sometimes he would do things, his feats of strength. I remember him, we had a Volkswagen Beetle in the yard, and I remember asking him like how strong he was, who was stronger, him or the Hulk. I remember him telling me he was stronger than the Hulk. And that when he punched the Hulk would run away and cry. I was like, I don't believe that, I don't believe that. And he went out, and I remember picking up the front of the VW Beetle, and like picking it up and like moving it around. My dad was a big, strong guy. But in this instance, when I was up on my dad's shoulder, I knew 100%, without a doubt, he was the strongest man in the universe. And there was nothing that he would ever do to let anyone hurt me or do anything bad to me. And he was going to be there to protect me. Men, somewhere out there, there is a person who looks up to you like this. Son, daughter, wife, somebody. And you don't have to be perfect, but what you can be is perfect for them. Let this example be our flag that we rally around when the smoke is thick and the battle's going on and there's screams and the guns are going off and you're feeling confused. Just look for that flag, look for that standard. Am I being a godly man? Because somebody out there needs it. Somebody out there is counting on you. I think we can do this. Men, let's be there for each other. We see somebody slipping up. Hey, what can I do to help you? Encourage. When a guy falls down, pick him up. All right? Amen? Can we do that? Praise God. I want to let you close. Thank you, guys.